Good evening and welcome to the shed. Today I've got a special guest. I'll have to ask him when he comes on exactly how I pronounce his name, but it looks like it's Antoni, but I don't know if that's exactly how you pronounce it. Anyway, I'll let my guest in now.
Good
Now
evening.
then, did I pronounce it? Is it Antoni? Or
Some of my friends would pronounce it as Antony, but how I grew up, it's Antoni because Antoni is Catalan for Antonio. So it's sort of a spoiler to my Filipino Spanish heritage. Mind you, the Philippines has been a Spanish colony for over 300 years, well, specifically 333 years. So that's why there is a lot of Spanish influence in our family names and in a good number of our first names. Not to mention, before America took over the country for a good number of years, there was a lot of Spanish influence um, after and especially after the Philippines was liberated in the 1800s, thanks to Emilio Aguinaldo. So there was like a lot of, and among other national heroes who did everything they could to liberate the Philippines from Spanish rule.
So is the
Spanish
Philippines
colonization.
is the Philippines more like independent nowadays, or does it still have some sort of Spanish influence? Or
Well, there's still Spanish influence, but it's pretty much independent. Although the Spanish influence is still quite strong, like the presence of haciendas.
It'd be ingrained into the culture, won't it? By now, if they would, with that length of time.
Definitely.
Spooky Bed in the chat has put your name down as Antoni. Is that how you'd spell it? How you'd say it?
Yes, definitely. Antoni. Yeah.
Antoni. Right.
Yes.
Antoni.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
Right.
Yeah, but because despite the fact that I was born in Buffalo, New York, USA, because my parents always told me, when you were born, it was very chilly, it was very cold when you were born. I ended up being raised in Cebu. Although I did go back to the States a couple of times, it was mostly for like visiting relatives there and mostly for like breaks and visiting family and friends there. So
Right. So
there you go.
you were born in the States, and then where did you go after that? Then where did you move to then?
I was raised in Cebu, Philippines,
All right. So
and
you
it's in the
went back to the
Visayas.
Philippines.
Yes,
Is
because my
where your
parents.
family from originally? Then is it the Philippines?
Yes,
Right.
my mom and dad, they are both from the Philippines. But if you saw them in person, you would think that they might have come from, like, let's say Spain or Mexico or like the United States, because
Mm.
they speak very well, especially in the United States, because they speak very great English, and English is pretty much the lingua franca in our home. Excuse the tongue-tiedness of it all. um, yeah, but the English was pretty much spoken in our home, and I went to a lot of international schools, as English is the language of instruction. And hi, Tyranno. And that English is also the language used in the office. Although growing up in the Philippines, there are a lot of dialects, and the main language is Tagalog,
Right.
which is like from Luzon, especially in the capital city of Manila. And
Mm.
then where I grew up, we spoke a completely different dialect, which was Cebuano.
Right. So it's the same language, but just a different dialect, is it?
Similar language, but like the words are rather different. Like, for example, the word love in Tagalog, it's mahal. and in Visayan, it's gugma.
All right, completely different then.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely different. Right,
And
because we did
then,
schedule, didn't we, to have the chat this afternoon, but I had to go to hospital to get some blood testing done, so that didn't happen
oh,
this afternoon.
that's
But
that's
yeah,
totally cool with me.
yeah, it's one of the things which was I don't know if I
And
mentioned it on.
another thing. The one of the question words, like what, in Tagalog it's ano, and in Visayan it's unsa.
Right, yeah, again, completely different.
Same thing
So,
with like
so if you
counting
meet
and isa
two
and usa.
people, if two people
Yeah.
only speak one dialect and one other person only speaks the other, would they not be able to communicate?
I think because of the fact that Tagalog is the official language, or especially when it comes to Filipino languages, it's sort of the dominant language. I think they could understand, but when it comes to people from the higher, more educated circles, a good number of them would opt to speak in English, or sometimes there will also be like a mixture of English and Tagalog, or English and Cebuano, or whatever, because, well, bear in mind that after Spanish colonization, it was the American colonization during the 1900s, and there's also a lot of American English influence in the way the products are marketed, as well as the existence of a good number of American products. And there's also the tendency for English to be used in certain commercials, or
Hmm,
in news channels, and a good number of other stuff.
right. So, what do you do much on your channel? What sort of I know I've subscribed to yours, but I haven't had a chance to look. Like, what sort of content do you put on your channel?
I mostly specialize in, yeah, Fred, Tony Chestnut, a very fun um, playground game, especially for the kids. Anyway, going back to my channel content, I specialize in making opera reviews, concert reviews, album reviews, musical reviews, ballet reviews, anime, cartoon, live
Hmm,
action shows, anime films, and cartoon films. So what you're basically looking at is music and media on my channel.
hmm.
I've also been trained as an actor, and way before I was having formal acting training, I participated in a lot of school plays growing up.
Hmm. Interesting. Well, my channel is mainly about like conspiracy theories. I love conspiracy theories. So I don't know if there's any conspiracy theories you'd like to have a chat about, or the other obviously content I do is religion. Being an atheist, I like to talk to
Mm,
people about religion. So I don't know whether which way you want to go with this. Whether you want to go the religious route
I'm
or
very
any.
keen on focusing on religion and sexuality,
All right. Okay.
especially considering that, you're looking at a gay man. And I know I don't like to keep flexing on my sexuality, but it's been with me ever since I was a very young boy.
Hmm,
But I didn't think too much about it back then, because back then when I was very, very young, about 5 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old at most, I remember being more drawn to muscular men, and very strong looking men in television commercials and in cartoons and anime.
hmm.
So I didn't know what it was back then. So I was in more into them than I was into girls, or looking at girls,
Hmm.
or even looking at women.
Yeah, I mean,
Granted,
basically, what you're describing
yeah.
there is what every person goes through. I went through exactly the same thing, but obviously, I was looking at girls, and young women is what I was looking at. And yeah, unfortunately, in today's society, it's getting better. But obviously, in today's society, we seem to focus on the fact that you were, the gay side of it, rather than just accepting that this is just part of growing up. And what you went through was exactly the same as me, apart from I was attracted to women and you were attracted to men.
Yeah.
But it's exactly the same thing. Like you were saying then, you didn't really know what it was at the time. Well, I didn't know what it was at the time. I didn't put a name on what it was at the time. It was just the way I felt inside, and obviously I could see the attraction of young girls at the time. Yours was the same, but towards boys.
Yeah, definitely. Because and when it comes to religion, there were some heated discussions about who I was solely preferring, because by the time I was 12, I was going through my confirmation. But even before I was 12, I was an 8-year-old about to go receive my first communion, because growing up in the Philippines, it is a predominantly Christian, well, more specifically Catholic country. So, stuff like communion and prayer meetings and all of the stuff involving prayer, they are observed almost to the letter, like to the letter.
So you were brought up in the Catholic faith then, was you? Is that the branch of Christianity? Yours was a Catholic faith, right?
Yes.
So how does that? I don't know exactly what the Catholic. I suppose every church would be different, and every person you speak to would be different. But what would be sort of like the way that they would accept or not accept a gay man or a gay woman, or was it pretty much nobody? People weren't bothered.
It's been kind of contentious because, well, coming from someone like me from a very privileged background, there are definitely a lot of things I had to kind of adhere, especially within my family. Like, I know it's not just the question of behaving yourself or treating others with respect, especially your parents and your grandparents, but there's also that fine line that kind of needs to be present, especially when you talk about like who you prefer. That can get a little bit sticky, so to say.
How was
Because
your parents? Were they fine with it, or?
nowadays they are, but it was kind of tough to deal with because I don't like to, drag them into this, and that's not what I want to do. But let's just say that there were some pointed discussions when it comes to the LGB community. There were some really pointed discussions about them. And I also have some relatives, a couple of relatives who are also of the LGB community as well.
Oh, right. So at least you're not alone then in that in the family. I suppose you could feel a bit of an outcast, I suppose, if you're the only one. But if there's a couple of others, at least you've got you can relate to what they're going through. I don't know whether they're younger than you or older than you, but you could certainly relate to what they're going through or what you went through. They could relate to what you're going through.
Definitely, because I mean, there were also a lot of like questions surrounding whether I had a girlfriend or do you like a girl, but I was still unsure at the time. I tried back then, but it seemed like the deepest, darkest core in me was still pretty much attracted to muscular guys. And I remembered reading in my first catechism book that it was forbidden to be in homosexual relationships. And these days, looking at it as an adult, I kind of find it rather questionable. But I understand the intention. I understand that, you can't look at your potential life partner with lust or whatnot. And it's also, you know, masturbation is a little bit of a taboo thing because you're also looking at a guy who kind of does jack off to like muscular men. Yeah. Yeah, I know. A bit rather inappropriate, but like I said, I've
I
also
know you
had
say
to
what you
make,
want on this channel. You
yeah,
say what you want on
but
this channel. Like people to be open and just say what they want to say. So yeah, don't worry about it. Say what you want.
yeah, but if I also have this one rule in my channel, which I swear I need to write explicitly: no kids in my pool, all kids out,
Yeah.
because in my channel and in everything I do, it's Adult Swim, full stop.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Well, man is always age restricted anyway, due to the fact I talk about religion and stuff like that. So even with me being an atheist, I've got grandkids. I've had kids myself. Well, I've got two grown-up kids myself, and I don't discuss my religious beliefs. My granddaughter at the moment, in fact, she's stopping tonight, which is why I didn't get on till late on, because like I say, I had to go to hospital and get my blood test done, and then I found out this afternoon. Oh, by the way, we're having Matilda. We've got her for tonight because the wife's looking after her tomorrow while my daughter's at work. So she's doing a sleepover tonight. So she's been in
Oh,
here most of the night, watching a bloke making cars and stuff. She was dead interested. This bloke, quite a good channel actually that we've been watching. And then you messaged me, and I thought, yeah, we can do it now. Then she's literally just gone up to bed. And what was going to say? Yeah, so my atheism, I don't put it onto my grandkids, and I never put it onto my kids. If they ask me questions relating to religion, I won't tell them that it's my opinion is that it's not true. I won't tell them that. I will just discuss the topic with them, and probably just say, well, what do you think? I don't push the fact that I don't believe onto them, because I don't think it's my position to do that. Try to be honest with them, and I don't try to discourage their beliefs. I try to get them to think critically, and but the belief side of it is entirely up to them. And the way I look at it is, when they get older, they'll either reject it or they will follow it, and either way, that is their life choice. I don't have a problem with that.
Definitely understandable. But even I have to criticize Catholicism because, well, I'm pretty sure you're aware that there have been cases of altar boys being violated by priests,
Yes.
or there have been cases of child abuse in the church.
In just about every continent and around the world, literally. Where there's a Catholic church, yes, it has gone on. It has been a big thing with them. And to be honest, I mean, it only came out probably about 20 years ago when the big scandals started hitting about all this going on. But society has known about this for hundreds of years, that this was going on.
Yeah, definitely.
I remember as a kid, the comedians on the TV, they could be a little bit more open back then than they are now with the jokes. And there was always quite a lot of jokes about the Catholic priests and stuff like that. So it was always something I think that people were aware of. But for some reason,
not to mention Sinead O'Connor ripping out that picture of Pope John Paul II on Saturday Night Live.
Right. I don't think I saw that.
I mean, I could see why she made that statement, and that was to call out the Catholic Church's hypocrisy on supposedly being a safe haven. But what about its children? The fact that they're being abused by, the clergy, and all this
Did you ever see
right there, the hypocrisy of it all.
Did you ever see the debate with it was Stephen Fry, Christopher Hitchens, Mo Molan, I think it was, one of the ex-UK MPs and the Bishop of somewhere. Did you ever see that?
Not yet,
Yeah, you
but
want to
you'll
watch
have
that.
to refer that to me.
That is a really interesting, and it covers a lot of what you've just mentioned. Because Stephen Fry's gay, and I was an atheist as well. Christopher Hitchens, and then I think it was Mo Morland? I can't remember. But anyway, one of the UK woman MP, and she used to be in the Church of England, I think it was, and the Church of England allowed to have women priests. And she left the Church of England to go to the and converted to Catholicism because they didn't. And even though she was a woman herself, she didn't think that a woman should be able to stand up and preach to people. That isn't a woman's place. So she left the religion.
Right.
Anyway, yeah. If you get a chance, Chris, just I don't know, just Google, YouTube, Christopher Hitchens and Stephen Fry debate, and it'll come up.
Definitely. I mean, you could even email. You could even email me as well. Okay. So going back to all of that.
How do you well, you've been a gay man and a Catholic. How do you square that circle? That it seems like the Catholic Church is against homosexuality. They even used to do they tried to do the conversion, didn't they? They reckon they could educate people out of being gay, and a lot of that went on in the UK.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
how do you square that circle then?
Well, here's my take. I would never go through the priesthood at all. That's not me. I mean, that's one thing of why it's kind of, it would be not only stupid of me to end up.
Anne Whitcomb. It's just sorry, Spooky Bed has just put it on. It was Anne Whitcomb. Yes, it was. Okay. Yes, it was Anne Whitcomb.
Right on.
And the Bishop of somewhere. I don't know where. Which way.
Okay. Well, I mean, ever since I was young, I've always been asked by relatives, "Oh, do you want to be a priest when you grow up?" And I just found myself saying no, because there was something about being a priest that entailed that you have to live a life of constant chastity and celibacy, and I was not really in for that, because the reason why they would ask me that is because what was going to happen if my prospects of having a girlfriend or a wife ended up failing, right? Yeah. I mean, to me, it just seems kind of too far-fetched and just not for me. And even back then when I was a young boy who was totally into, anime, starting to become more into anime, as well as liking a lot of the animated shows from Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon, eventually Disney Channel, before becoming a full-fledged anime fan, I was starting to just not be turned on by the whole concept of priesthood or, being a full-time church member or whatever.
So how important is your religious belief in your life? Is it something that you hold very high, or is it something that you're just sort of like, yeah, it's there in the background, you sort of believe it, but you don't sort of study it or have much to do with religion? Whereabouts would you be on the scale of religion?
I'd say somewhere in the middle. Like, I know it's important for me to believe in, Jesus Christ, because, well, from what we've been seeing these days with all of the natural disasters and all of the nations just going against each other. I mean, think about what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. Think about what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. And
my pushback from that would be every generation sees the same. Obviously, you go further when I don't know what year you was born. How old you are? What?
I'm 31 years old, and I'll be
Right.
32 in 26 days.
All right. Happy birthday in 26 days. But, yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, we had the Falklands War in 1982. Prior to that, well, during that same time, we had the Troubles out in Northern Ireland. You go further than that to my father's generation. He was born at the beginning of the Second World War. His father was born during the First World War, or just before the First World War, and was obviously arriving the Second World War. And then you go further back than that, you've got the Napoleonic Wars. And so every generation goes through something different. Also, with us in the 70s and 80s, there was always, it was during the Cold War. So there was always the threat of nuclear war. That was a big thing. That there was a big threat of that. So I think every generation can use the same argument that, oh, when you look at the world how it is at the moment with all the violence, the wars, the troubles, I would say that every generation can say the same thing. And the further you go back in the generation, there was more wars, there was more troubles, there was more, obviously, before the medical advances that we have at the moment. Going back 100, 150 years, people were, would suffer terribly with illnesses and things like that. So I think we actually live in the best time that the human race has ever lived in. If you think of any era over the past 2,000 years, which one would you like to live in? I would still like to live in this one because I think this is the best one. You go back 500, 600 years, and the chances are someone's going to put an axe in the back of your head. It was that brutal, and like into the
exactly.
So we can look at our small time that we spend on the planet. If we're lucky, 70, 80, maybe 100 years you spend on the planet. That's the only window that you've got to look at. So you're noticing, that like at the moment we've got with climate change and just overpopulation of the globe. I mean, when I was born, I think it was something like 3.5 billion, 4 billion people on the planet. We're at 8, 9 billion people now. So just in my lifetime, I'm only 58, but just in 58 years, the world population has literally doubled, which has caused a lot of, in like third world countries, it's caused a lot of trouble.
Definitely.
So I think every generation can say the same thing that you've just said there about the state of the world. But I think we actually live in the best times now than we ever have done. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it kind of does make sense. I understand where you're coming from perfectly.
I mean, I think going back to sort of like just prior to like the First World War, the average person lived to about 35 to 40 year old. Yes, you get people that live over, but over an average, over the whole population, it was something like an average lifespan of 35 to 40 years old. And obviously, child mortality rate back in them days was absolutely horrendous. People would easily have 7, 8 children, and they might only get 3 or 4 that would actually survive.
Yeah, sadly.
And obviously that has all changed now. So again, I think we do live in the best times, but we get fixated on the here and now, and we don't think that this has ever happened before.
Definitely. Every time I think about Catholicism versus me being a gay man, I mean, I know the importance of it is that, as long as you are clean, spiritually, and as a person, and as long as you are not abusing children, as long as you are actually protecting children and not indoctrinating them, then you should be okay. Because that's why I have a very, very stringent policy when it comes to children and what I produce in terms of my content, whether I make videos on YouTube or draw fan art on DeviantArt. I have a very, very strict no kids allowed policy because unless you are 18 years old and over, then no minor or nobody under 18 should ever even think about going to my channel or to my content. That's just sort of my law of the jungle here.
Yeah,
and of course, in terms of, Catholicism, I believe in prayer. I mean, there is the essence of prayer, especially
Mm.
if great times of need or in times of gratitude. I believe in that. But I also believe in a thing called karma. I always believe that if you treat people well,
Mm.
good things will come to you. But if you choose to be a mean jerk, let alone a total curmudgeon, let's just say that shitty things will happen to you if you do not,
Mm.
repent.
Yeah.
And it will
Yeah,
certainly be doubtful if you'll ever come back to anybody's good graces.
Oh, just a quick one. Spooky Bed has put in the debate link to the debate. That's what
Thanks,
Spooky Bed
Spooky
is.
Bed Hair. So
And
I'm gonna.
yeah, what you were saying there about the about karma. I mean, I don't believe in karma per se, as in the actual belief of karma. I think karma itself, if you actually look into it, is it would actually be horrendous if that was true, if karma
Mhm.
was true, because that would mean that anything bad happens to you, you deserved it. That's how karma works. So
Yeah,
anything
true.
it's either something you've done in this life or something you've possibly done in a previous life, and this is karma getting you back. So basically, if you get raped as a woman, you deserve it. It's payback for something you've done. So to
Mm,
me, I absolutely do not have a belief in karma. We know karma doesn't work because we all know some pretty horrible people that have fairly successful, happy lives, and there can be
true,
absolutely horrible people. But what you were
true.
saying was true. That yes, generally, if you treat people with kindness and be kind to people that you meet, generally you will get that back in return. I think that's just a natural state. Most people would experience that. If you go about being a dick all the time, then people are going to just treat you exactly the same way as you try and treat them. And
I
no,
also believe in catharsis as well. So I believe in catharsis.
all right, yeah,
Yeah, because you're looking at a guy who's had to deal with, well, bullying, especially when I was in high school. I've had probably one of my worst years in high school, which was senior year. And a good number of my former batchmates tended to become meaner toward me. And there were times I felt like, yeah, I screwed up on certain things. And then, despite me not doing that much wrong, I still felt like they just chose to be angry and mean jerks.
mm.
Not like I want to play victim here, but really, it's just the truth as how I experienced it.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that's more to do with the immaturity of the people that were being like that?
I would say that's part of immaturity, and the
Mm.
other part is, well, also projecting their own insecurities and their own frustrations onto, you know, especially me, because I was not into the same things that the guys were. And I guess you could say that a good number of my former batchmates sort of had to be almost way too cautious for their own good, because I kind of had a reputation for trying to be nice to everybody, although there were some jerks who tried to destroy that reputation,
Yeah,
as in really wanted to destroy that.
yeah.
So these type of people I don't really have that much empathy, let alone sympathy for, although with
Do you
some
think
it's
them?
a little bit more complicated.
Do you think them people that were like that? I'm assuming in the teenage years. Do you think that they would have changed and matured now and probably wouldn't be the same person?
Some of them actually changed for the better,
Mm,
although there's still some of that, you know, enabling mentality that's still present.
mm. Because I find that people, when I was a teenager, I was completely different by the time I was 25. So when I was 25, if I look back to when I was, say, 15, I was a completely different person. Then at 35, looking back to when I was at 25, again, I was a completely different person. And the same at 45. And even now, I'm 58. When I look back to when I was, 48, I'm a completely different person. I think every 10 years, we change in our maturity as we get older. And
Yeah, definitely.
let's say I have a completely different outlook on life than I did when I was 15, 16, just leaving school. Completely different outlook on life.
Mm. I had a frank conversation with one of my friends, and you know, I think one of them said it well. He said that I think the reason why those people would bully you is because they just didn't understand you as a person.
Yeah, I would say that's probably a lot of bullying. That's how a lot of bullying starts, I think.
And I know that if I had just beat them up, they would have just left me alone because honestly, they chose to. But then again, I guess I was, trying to preserve that because attending that British style business school also made me realize that there were many things at stake, like reputation, trying to remain in good contact with certain people, trying to, build healthier contacts with people and try to just redeem certain relationships. Although the hardest lesson I learned is not everybody's going to be redeemed.
Mm. Yeah, but I can understand why you were like that back in them days, because doing the subject you were talking about, that you were studying, it would be very advantageous to have an healthy relationship with people in the similar thing, because they're the type of people that you're likely to meet back up with later on. In 10 years' time, you could start a new job and find that one of the people there was a student at the same university as you. So, these people that were being dicks when you were at school, they might find this karma that you're talking about might actually come back and bite them, because somebody might be in a position that is a lot higher than them when they turn up. Just to get me meaning, that's to me,
Yeah.
that's how karma works. But
Although I kind of have to look back, I always look back at this memory in high school because you know how I mentioned that I believe in catharsis?
yeah,
Well, after all the shit that I've been thrown left and right for my senior year, despite all that fucking shit thrown at me left and right, you know what happened? I graduated with honors. Granted, I did not graduate with, valedictorian or salutatorian or all that. But the fact that I graduated with honors and a loyalty medal because I studied 4 years of high school and a best in performing arts, violinist of the year, and like an award for best behavior. And I even passed like 4 out of 5 of my GCSE exams. I've had other friends who passed all their IGCSE exams, but you know what? I look back at it and said, see, that's what catharsis does. It makes you realize that despite all the shit that I went through, especially in my senior year in high school, and a good number of the friendships that were thankfully destroyed. Well, I wouldn't necessarily call them friendships per se, but like the so-called ones that ended up being thankfully destroyed, I finally got the fuck out of that danged high school.
yeah, fair
But
point.
going back to also my sexuality, I really tried to like girls, but I kind of approached it in a way that made me feel kind of awkward because I think deep down, I think it's just because one,
Well, I
I
can
didn't
relate.
have a lot of things in common with a lot of my girl colleagues, let alone girl schoolmates and all that. I
Mm.
mean, a good number of us worked better as friends, and I preferred having platonic friendships. And the other thing is that, um, you know, I guess you could say that my interests were distinct to a fault. I was a guy who loved opera. I was a guy who loved anime. I was a guy who like gave a crap more about these topics than a lot of my former batchmates did. Although I do have a couple of former batchmates who were kind of into anime as well, but a good number of my former batchmates were not into opera at all.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I
And
think
I
opera.
also was a trained singer,
Yeah,
specializing mostly in classical.
I would find it very difficult myself to be interested in opera type stuff. Yeah, I would find that extremely difficult um, to get into. It's not my bag at all. It really isn't.
Because my maternal grandmother, my late maternal grandmother, rest in peace, she was the one who got me into opera.
Mm.
First, she started me out with, Luciano Pavarotti, Placido Domingo, and Jose Carreras, and even the older singers like Enrico Caruso and Franco Corelli, and even Leontine Price. And even one of my mom's sisters, i.e., one of my aunts, she also got me into Charlotte Church.
Mm.
And even Josh Groban. So that's how I got into all of this, you know, opera, classical crossover, and classical music. It was
I'm
mostly
just going to
through
say
my
I've met
family.
Charlotte Church. I've met Charlotte Church, and I've also met Summit Bocelli.
Ah, yes, Andrea Bocelli. I cannot
Yeah,
forget about him.
yes, he's blind, isn't he? Yes, I've met him as well.
Yes,
The
yes, he
blind
is.
guy. Yes, I met both of them. I used to do security for a TV program in the UK called TFI Friday with Chris
Wow.
Evans, and they were both guests on there. So when I was doing security there, I met the pair of them. Yeah, I
Now
met a lot
that
of
is amazing. That is totally amazing.
Yeah, I did that for about 3 years. No, just over 2 years, 2.5 years. I
When
did
was
that.
that? Was it in the 90s or the early 2000s?
It'd be the end of the 90s into 2000. I think it ended about 2000, 2001. It actually ended, and I started working there either towards the very end of 98, the beginning of 99. And I did that until it finished either in late 2000, 2001. I can't remember exactly when it finished. So for about 2 years, I used to do security for TFI Friday, which was a TV program that was broadcast every Friday evening, and they had singer guests on literally every Friday. So yeah, I was doing security for that. It was an interesting time. And
Fascinating.
plus, it was an extra way of earning extra money. I was still in the forces at the time. I was based just down the road. I was at a place called Odeon, and it was filmed in Hammersmith at Riverside Studios. So I used to drive into Hammersmith on a Friday afternoon, and then do the security for the evening, and then drive back home.
That's amazing. That is totally amazing.
Yeah, it was an interesting time. It really was.
Hmm.
So going back to religious thing, I don't really want to push it too far if you're not comfortable with it.
Fine. It's fine.
But what makes you believe? Do you think it was due to the fact you were brought up with that religion, so you just accepted it, or did you actually look at all the claims? How do you find that? I mean, when I look at any religion, I've never held a religious belief. I was telling you this the other day. I've never held any religious belief whatsoever. So it wasn't like I did believe. So I've never had the experience of believing a religion and then being sort of like converted out of it. I've never held the belief. So when I look at all the different religions, especially Christianity, because obviously the UK is a Christian country, so to speak, it was all to do with Christianity. But when I looked at the stories of Christianity, to me, even as a young child, they seemed so outrageous and unbelievable to the point where I couldn't believe them. Like I say, God creating the universe and the world and everything in 6 days, and then resting on the seventh day. I can't take that literal. The worldwide flood, where God basically floods all of the world. He kills all the human beings and all the animals on the planet, apart from 8 people on the boat and 2 of each kind of animal. and then the rest of the world from 4,500 years ago is populated to the state that we're in now. And then you've got the virgin birth, and then the miracles that Jesus supposedly did, and then the crucifixion and the rising from the dead after 3 days. To me, every one of them stories, and there's even more than that in it. I've just literally gone over the ones that are fairly popular that most people will have heard of. I can't square that in my mind. I just cannot. I don't know how you get to the point where you accept that that's true, because I'm not saying science is right on everything, and science is forever changing. It's forever updating, and to me, that's the beauty of science. It does. If it realizes it's got something wrong, it will change, and it will say that we were wrong. It won't stick to it just for the sake of sticking to it because people like that particular belief. Science isn't like that. And when you look at the different religious beliefs, you've got to disregard what science tells us to believe these. Now, I don't want to say we believe it, but science is telling us at the moment that the origin of the universe was about 14 billion years ago with the Big Bang. What caused the Big Bang, we don't know, but you've got the Big Bang, and then we can trace time forward to our present day. We've got evolution of animals on the planet, of how the different species of animals have come about and how they've evolved over time. But if you believe what the Bible is telling you, these animals didn't evolve. They were created as they are now. Back then, the human race was created as it is now, back then with Adam and Eve. The Adam and Eve story alone, we know that if you get two animals, and that's the only species that of any species, you've only got two left. That species is finished. You cannot save that species. It's gone.
Yeah. The same thing can be said about man and a woman, because I was constantly brought up with the belief that man should consummate with a woman and vice versa. Therefore, it's sort of been hammered in my head growing up that, you can't say that you're gay. You can't say that you like guys. It's not natural, all that. That's why it was really tough for me to try to come out of the closet when I was in my teens, because, well, every time I watch a show, like an animated show, whether it be anime or an action cartoon, I've always found myself totally, attracted to the muscular man. I don't care if it's He-Man, I don't care if it's Basuli, I don't care if it's Tarzan, I don't even care if it's Long Shadow from Justice League Unlimited. I was totally attracted to the muscular men. And well, my folks kind of always asked me if I had a girlfriend or not, or all this. It's just like, no matter how hard I try to like a girl, it almost seems like deep down I'm always feeling more for guys. I mean, because the time I actually liked a girl, the time I actually genuinely liked a girl was when I was 14, and this girl was very, very nice. She was from Alberta, and I thought I was gonna have a shot with her, like being in a relationship with her, because I kind of saw her as the antithesis to like one girl in my early middle school years who, despite being like a grade or two younger than me, she used to give me all these mean faces and side eye and acted like a total bitch to me, because I mean, despite her starting off as rather nice, but my God, when she was in her tweens, oh my God, she used to be such a bitch. But the girl that I genuinely liked when I was spending like 3 weeks in that school, what was that, Corpus Christi school in Oxford, and then she was from Canada. I genuinely liked her. I remember really liking her when I was 14 and wanted to a relationship with her. It because despite her living in Canada, well, Alberta, and despite me being back in, Cebu, I wanted to still pursue that relationship, even though it was long distance. But I was
Yeah.
still kind of still feeling for guys, muscular guys. I still like watching muscular guys.
Hmm.
That was sort of the irony of it all back then.
Yeah, but let's say if that's your sexuality, then that's exactly what you can't change your sexuality, and
Yeah, I
you're
mean,
basically
even I used to be. I mean, I even even when I was in high school, I was teased so relentlessly by a lot of my former batchmates who thought I had something with this girl, who I mainly saw as a friend. But although I tried to like her, genuinely, it was like it wasn't going to work at all.
Hmm.
So the first incident in that British style business school in Cebu, the first incident that I remembered that my sexuality was being called into question was when I was in this chat, and a good number of my former batchmates said, "Oh, you should kiss this guy," and the guy left the chat, and then they said, "How dare you not kiss him?"
Hmm.
And it was a very frustrating experience I had to deal with. They said it was a joke, but it was like, can't they just leave me alone about this shit?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
Unfortunately,
came
people can be very
another
cruel.
former batchmate. Then came another former batchmate 1 year later in my second year, and he blurted to everybody saying that I drew naked men on my journal, even though it was supposed to be private. It was like, how dare he, and how dare a lot of my other batchmates. In fact, that was really that one moment where I wanted to transfer so much, especially to
Hmm.
another country, because I couldn't tolerate their shit.
Yeah.
But, my dad, he had his reservations, and, he constantly made up a bunch of, you know, quite frankly, silly sob stories and a lot of excuses. And then when I came back to high school, well, to continue, there was another piece of rubbish that happened, um, in which I was set up by a good number of my former batchmates to ask a guy that I had no interest in, no romantic interest in, to prom, specifically junior prom.
Hmm.
What happened was it trans what happened was this piece of rubbish transpired. How dare you ask this guy to prom? Why did you ask him to prom? Oh, you're disgusting for asking this guy to prom. You know what I like to say to these people? Why don't you just go fuck yourselves in the ass? I would have really explicitly said that to them. But because of my, quite frankly, nice guy reputation, and I think that's why they tried to target me, because I was doing a lot in school.
Hmm.
I was singing, I was in string ensemble, I was this theater kid. So I think that's why they targeted me.
Hmm.
And it hurt so bad because I felt like I was set up so that I could be pushed out of that closet, even
Hmm.
though I was still like what, between 15 to 17 years old and then 18 at the most.
Right.
Mm, It
So
was
anyway,
like,
going back to my original question was how do you square the
how
thing
do
with
I
the
even
religion?
square this? How do I
Well,
even square this?
about
You
about
ask?
about religion, about the religion side of it.
Well, here's how I see it. Here's how I see it. I try to just, you know, I just try to um leave sexuality and all this stuff
Hmm.
when I go to church, either out the door or just leave it outside for a while.
Hmm.
Because when I think about it, it's sort of like, there's always a time and place for everything. There's always a time and place for everything. I
What
always
about
believe in it.
What about the examples that I gave you that are taught in the Bible as facts? Like I say, with the earth created in 6 days, the
Yeah.
flooding and all that. How do you square all that? Because, like I say, if you've got to disagree with science. If you're going to accept these, you've got to disagree with science to accept them. How do you square that?
I
Or
don't
is it
really
some?
have a concrete answer for that. I
Mm,
really don't. Sorry if I'm not really the best
no, no, no,
person to give
no, no.
you the best answer, but still,
Mm,
I wouldn't know the best way to square it all off. All I'm speaking about is like how religion and sexuality kind of became completely conflated growing up, especially
mm,
as a young gay dude in the Philippines. There was a lot of mixed messages growing up there, I tell you what.
mm.
There was a lot of mixed messages.
Right. How do you find it now? Are you accepted much more? Do you find there's much
I
pushback on
have
gay
genuine
people?
friends who actually accepted my sexuality. Um,
Do you
I
find
I
nowadays that
think
if you meet somebody and then a day or two later they find out that you're gay, do you find that they're bothered, or do you find that people will just suddenly avoid having contact with you? How are you treated in society in general nowadays? Basically, what I'm trying to get at is, do you think things have changed from when you were younger, when you
somewhat,
were like,
yeah. I feel like
yeah,
it's somehow changed, but there's also a pro and a con. The pro is that we've become a lot more accepting of people from the LGB community, but the con is that there is the risk of hypersexualization as well as you know becoming more clownish with media portrayals of the LGB community.
hmm,
It's sort of like that fine line that still needs to be addressed, especially when teenagers and children are involved.
teenagers and what? Sorry.
Children,
Oh, right, yes.
because the thing I've learned, and I've had this conversation with a very good friend, is that you know the harshest reality I had to face is that it takes patience because when you're a child or a teenager, you're still finding out who or what you really want,
Hmm,
and it will have to take maturity to affirm something.
hmm,
Mind you, I didn't come out of the closet until I was about 21 years old, and toward my mom's friend. And when I finally graduated high school, I had an old flame who was a guy, a well built, handsome guy I had a crush on. But because of the experience I had with my quite frankly cracked former batchmates, who sometimes I still wish they ended up fucking themselves from the moon back.
you really had an
Yeah,
hard time,
the
didn't
crack
you? Yeah.
yeah, I would consider those who set me up to ask my a former batchmate, a former guy batchmate to prom. I would still love for them to go fuck themselves to the moon and back. I'm sorry if I'm constantly swearing, and I
No, you're fine. No, yeah, like I
know,
say, feel free.
yeah, I
That's
know that I'm dropping f bombs left and right, but sometimes that's how I feel about all
mm,
of these losers, because that's
mm,
how they are in my eyes. I don't care if they got jobs they're doing well in. I don't care if they're doing stuff like this left and right. I don't care if they even have families. The fact that
mm,
these people would do this willingly, yeah, they can go fuck themselves. And I
mm.
know that there are people who are gonna make them excuse that, oh, they were just teenagers. Well, don't underestimate teenagers because they are freaking smart.
Or it can be absolutely bloody horrible as well because they don't have the life experiences as well, which is what I was saying earlier. Do you think it was due to the fact they were teenagers and they didn't have the life
Not
experience and
just
probably didn't
that, but
realize what they
also
were doing?
a good number
It's
of
still not
them
an
were
excuse.
like a good number of them also are also privileged. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think they were also taking their own insecurities and frustrations out on me, and they were kind of targeting me, a good number of them. So because of that experience that I had with a good number of my former batchmates, it was hard for me to try to tell this guy that I had a crush on him and liked him. I didn't know how he was going to respond. I had a casting with him, and I think he wanted to see if I was going to play like a quote unquote girl, like if I was going to be like his partner or whatever.
Right.
I think he I think what he saw in me was I was hurt. I was bullied because I like different things, and you know, because mind you, the guy I was auditioning for, it was for supposed to be for like a thesis film that was going to be shot in Manila. Mind you, the first thesis film I was in Manila, that was actually the best experience I had for my film school year. I wanted it to be my second thesis film shoot in Manila because I was still living in Cebu at the time. But I was so disheartened, so disappointed, and so fucking down when I didn't get the part. But
Whereabouts are you
yeah,
living now? Where's home
I'm
now?
living in Berlin. I'm living in Berlin.
Oh yes, you did mention that before. Is
Yeah.
that somewhere where you plan on staying for a long period of time, or is it just work wise, or
Study because
studying?
because I've been living in Berlin for like nearly 12 years now.
Right.
The first 3 years I was here, I was studying to be an actor. And then the backup plan was for me to have studied in university after acting school, but my high school diploma did not end up being recognized here. So I had to
Right.
do, of course, what you people call there as A levels, we call here in German the Abitur, or in my
Right.
case, as an American born from Filipino parents, I would kind of call it a GED.
Yeah.
Or as we say in Germany, Abitur für Erwachsene, which, mind you, a lot of the stuff I had to deal with was mostly in the German language. And I will admit it
I
was
was going to
tough.
ask that. That was going to be my next question. So all your studying, is it done in German?
Most of it was back then
Right.
before going into university. I mean, granted, every time we had like something in English, it was something that I enjoyed because when I was doing my Abitur for adults, I knew that the course I was going to major in was in English. Like my major course during my Abitur years was English, and that led me to study English as my major in university and musicology as my minor also in university.
So I take it you're fluent in German, though. Yes.
Yeah.
I'd say I lived out in Germany for 4 or 5 years, and the only thing I could say was "Ein Gros Bier bitte." It's the only thing I can say.
Cool.
It's the only thing I needed to say. One line,
Yeah.
or Ein klein Bier bitte.
No, yeah.
For a small beer for the wife, large beer for me.
Yeah. I think the reason why I wanted to move to Europe was because even back then as a teenager was because I knew I wanted to start a life where I could fully express my sexuality and myself. I needed that so much growing up. I mean, from the first time I dealt with my first jolt of independence when I was 13 and living with a host family in Oxford for 2 weeks. And then the second one when I was living in a boarding school for 3 weeks, also in Oxford. Those were definitely my first jolts of independence, especially thanks to, my parents, right?
Mm.
Even my mom wanted me to live abroad as a teenager.
So your parents still over in the Philippines, are they?
Yes.
Right. Okay. How do
But
you find being in Germany, and in Europe that your sexuality is more accepted than outside?
Yeah,
Because I would say that when I
definitely.
was
I
over
feel like
in,
it's a lot more accepted here in Europe. I mean, let's also not forget about in the Netherlands or Holland or whatever
mm,
you want to call it. Netherlands or Holland, because I noticed that the gay scene there in Holland is quite prominent,
right.
if I'm not mistaken.
Because I would say
So
when I was over there, I would have said that the Germans' outlook or Europe's outlook towards homosexuality was probably where we are now. So we're probably 10, 15, 20 years behind them. Even now, I would say that the UK is at least 10 years behind the rest of Europe when it comes to acceptance of it.
I think because living in Berlin, I know that there are those people who are going to constantly go off on this, multiculturalism and all that, but actually living in Berlin has made me fully open myself up a lot more in terms of me being a gay man.
Mm.
And
You feel more comfortable over there, do you?
I do. I mean, it took time really, but eventually I felt kind of good in myself, and there was a little bit more fulfillment in this point in my life, really.
Mm.
Um, True story. I even, of course, but it wasn't particularly easy at first. And true story, I was once an extra in a film,
All right.
um,
One that we
and
might have.
I was totally attracted to this muscular, handsome German guy by the name of Basti. He was a very nice guy, and he kind of knew that I was gay. And when I asked him to flex his biceps for me, and he did, and he gave me a peck on the cheek. And mind you, I was 24 years old at the time, and I think he was already in his mid 30s,
Right.
and he was working in the swinger club. So I was an extra there, so he can imagine. It
Yeah.
was quite a fun time with this guy because he was not only handsome both physically and in terms of his musculature, but he was really nice.
Right. Anyway, it's good that you're enjoying yourself over in Germany anyway, and you're accepted there. I'm just looking. We've just come up to an hour and 10 minutes, so
That's
I'll probably do about an hour, and then normally, that'll be about it.
Yeah,
Uh,
but
like
even
to go.
looking back at my time in the Philippines, I mean, it's sort of also because, when you're part of a privileged family, there are definitely some, rules that you have to abide by. Like there are certain things that you need to kind of sweep under the rug and all that stuff. And
Mm,
maybe that's also why my dad initially thought that this school that I went to in this British international school or this British business school was good for me, not only because he wanted me to learn how to earn money, but I think there was also that part of him that expected me to be conventionally manly in terms of not only earning money but also getting
mm,
a girl so I could marry her and have kids and after college. But it was like, no, that lifestyle was never meant for me to begin with. I mean, I've gone through trial and error. I've had a bunch of former batchmates just be pretty unpleasant, but the ones who were not partaking in this shit, I say, good for them. Actually, a good number of my former batchmates, when I fully came out on Facebook, not just batchmates, but schoolmates, they were in support of me coming out. And I
mm,
was only 23 years old back in 2015.
mm,
And even back then, when I was a teenager, I mentioned before that I wanted to go goth and I wanted to like be a lot skinnier back then when I was a teenager because maybe it was just my way of you know counterculture, as it were.
Mm.
And sometimes, the whole notion of being Catholic and being from a privileged family and me trying to like find my identity through this counterculture stuff would have been a bit too overwhelming for a lot of the grown-ups. Well, especially especially my dad, and maybe to some extent my mother, but mostly my dad. Um, that would have been that would have been pretty contentious.
Mm.
Although, that didn't stop me from liking, old films and opera and anime. That didn't stop me, you know, even when looking back at that. I think my desire to go goth and be a lot thinner and not really and not necessarily end up being like muscular was sort of my way of saying there's a sort of pride that I was slowly feeling growing
Do you think
up.
there's maybe a little bit of a rebellious stage, rebelling, a little bit of a pushback?
Yeah, there was a bit of rebellion from my
Mm.
part. I mean, I tried telling my teachers that my mom wouldn't leave me alone with food. I think I look back at that stage and realized, yeah, that was that slow rebellion that I wanted to
Mm.
and like go through when I was 14, 13 going on 14, and I realized that would not have solved the problem. I think it's just
No.
that reality I had to deal with growing up.
Yes, it is difficult growing up. That's the thing, and I think that most people at some stage go through a bit of a rebellious stage. I know I did, but I went through my
I
rebellious
did
stage.
as well. I
But,
did. I did go through a little bit of a rebellious stage.
mm,
Yeah, especially at 16. But
I was
I
especially at
bounced back to being trying to be the people pleaser, and like really, even when looking back at my time in that school, being a people pleaser and trying to keep everybody happy. God,
Mhm.
it was
Yeah,
really a fucking headache. I tell you what, it was a fucking headache. Looking back at that time there, it was like, and then you still have like and then you had certain crackheads just trying to tease your sexuality out of you by setting you up with, you know, someone that you didn't really have any feelings for, and then all this shit and being spread around like wildfire. Yeah, I almost want
yeah,
to
but
tell
I
those people to
suppose
go
I
fuck
suppose a lot
off.
of people go through that though, not just gay people. What you went through,
Yeah,
I would say that even me as a straight person, back in the days when I was single, that people
yeah,
try and push, oh, there's a certain girl here, I'm sure you'll like her, and they're always trying to set you up with somebody, and it was always somebody you didn't want to be with, but then that put you in
yeah,
an awkward situation. You
definitely.
felt an awkward situation because they'd set you up with this girl to go for a drink with them or to meet up, and this girl was going to be there, and it was always an awkward situation. And to be fair, it was quite a relief when they went, look, I don't really want to get into a relationship. I'll have a drink with you. And you just go, brilliant. That's exactly, yeah, we can enjoy a few drinks. We can have a laugh. That's it. End of it. Yeah, I think that
Mhm.
happens in probably in all different, well, regardless of what your sexuality is, I would say that happens all the time. Anyway, we're coming up to an hour 15. So I will probably end the stream here because, like I say, I don't want it to
No
go
worries.
on. And there's a lot of times where a lot of these streams will go on for like 3-4 hours, and I don't really. I find that people lose interest if it goes much over sort of like an hour. So we'll probably end the stream here. Don't go anywhere though. Obviously, I'll put you backstage. Don't go anywhere, and as soon
All
as
right,
it's ended, then I can put you back on, and we can have a quick chat, and then uh, go our own ways. So, I'll just put you backstage, and I don't
right
know if there's
on.
anything else you want to say to the people watching.
Well, you can all subscribe to my channel. I have a lot of review content to offer you guys. I also have a lot of stuff that I did back then when I was an acting student.
Do you have a link to your
and,
channel that you can put into the chat?
Excuse me?
Do you have a link to your channel you can put in the chat?
Oh, definitely, definitely. I'll send it in the private chat first to you, and then hang on a second. I'm just gonna go to, yeah, hang on a second. Hold on. Because, or better yet, I could just place it in the, I'll just place it in the, so I'm gonna join the chat. Hang on. Uh-oh. Hang on. Or better yet, I could just like send it to you in the private chat, and then you can also like if it's possible, I'll send it to you in the private chat, and then you could also like put it in the comments, you know.
Yeah, go to the comments, and then I should be able to paste in there. Right, so there we go. So that's
there's my channel, you guys. Feel free to subscribe to the channel.
Subscribe to the channel. Have a look, see what his content is like. Anyway, I'll put you backstage, and then like I say, don't go anywhere. And as soon as it's ended, we jump back in. Right, I'll just put you backstage. Right, so there you go. That was Antoni. So yeah, brilliant chat there with him. So his channel is in the chat. Subscribe to his channel, have a look, see what his content is like. And with that, let's say we're coming up to 1 hour 20 minutes now, so I'll end it here. I'll just put my intro in, and then I'll end the stream. So thanks everybody who's turned up. I think we've got Fred Burley, Ian Davenport, Trusty 8, Spooky Bed Air. I did see, I can never say his name, Tyrannotherum. Yeah, thanks very much for all turning up and watching this live stream. And I'll catch you all on the next one.